Hello, everyone. I hope you guys had a wonderful lunch. Just to start the session right back in, the exit is at the back. Also, I want to thank everyone for choosing this session to come into. And the bathrooms are also at the very back. If you head to the right, that's where you can find the bathrooms. In case there's an emergency, that's the same way you want to exit right out. And if you haven't already done so, make sure to download the application. It's called AWS America's Events. For iOS users, you guys can find it at the App Store. And for Android users, there is a link that you want to follow, but it's spread out all throughout the venue, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. You can find the schedule info, speaker information, and so much more on it, so you should definitely check that out. And my name is Alicia Kim, and I am a marketing specialist intern with AWS Social Media. You guys are currently in the AWS Playbook for Cloud Readiness at a U.S. federal agency. So if you are at the incorrect session, this is your time to trickle out and find the correct session. But if not, we are going to have Rodney and Christine from AWS come up and speak to us about AWS Playbook.
Mic check. All right. Hey, everyone. How are you doing? Okay, we can't go to sleep right now. I know everybody just ate that really high-quality food, and it's really kind of making you drowsy. So if you need to stand up, do a couple jumping jacks to get ready, we can do that. We'll do some agile ceremonies right now. We'll stand up. We can just stand up the whole session if you want to. You know, it really will help you circulate your blood. So again, my name's Rodney Grilly. Principal consultant with AWS, been around for a little over 5 years now, and we're here to tell you about one journey that we had a customer that we spent with a customer in the last year, and it's based on the number of other journeys that we've been taking through customers through over a number of years now. And I'll also let Christine introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm a senior engagement manager at AWS. I work alongside Rodney with our large migrations, and I mostly work with our public sector customers, the federal government, and universities alike.
Excellent. All right. So what we're going to cover today is we're first going to go over our playbook and our overall approach and what we've learned over time to really reduce the amount of time it takes to get customers ready to start taking advantage of migrating or building net new applications on AWS. And then we're going to go into a specific case study about a federal agency that we helped through this last year. And Christine will go into details about that, lessons learned, and other items. And then we're going to do a demo of all the Agile tools that we're using. And many of these tools, almost everything that we're going to be showing you today, is not about AWS or Amazon. It's about an agnostic set of lean and agile tools and mechanisms that you can use to start transforming your organization. Whether you want to do it by yourself, you want a partner to help you, or if you want AWS to come in and provide some guidance and oversight. So how many people right now today are in the middle of or are planning a migration or net new adoption of cloud-based services for your applications? All right, majority of the room, looks good. So hopefully this will be an interesting topic. Hopefully there's a lot to take away from it. And again, you need to be thinking about the items that we're going to cover today, because when we talk about transformation of organizations, as we go through this, you'll see that about 70% of everything we're going to show you to get ready and be operationally ready to run workloads in the cloud has to do with what? What do you think? People or technology? People, that's right. It's all about the people. It's about change. People don't like change, and so we'll talk about that in more detail. All right, so I always start off, I've been presenting here for the last 4+ years. Last 2 years, my sessions were called, My CIO Says We're Going All In. Now what? So how many people are in that situation right now? Your leadership has told you that you have a date when you need to, you have a mandatory date to actually migrate workloads or shut down the data center or not refresh hardware. Is that a common use case? Okay. So before 2015, that wasn't common. Customers were down at the project level, and so we use this simple 4-phase model. They go from project, where you're just kicking the tires, you're doing a proof of concept, you're trying to figure out if this thing is right for you. Whether it's a cloud service provider or a SaaS provider, it doesn't matter what it is, right? It's technology, new technologies. Then once you say, no, we have one or two validated experiments, so we had some hypotheses, we ran some experiments, this is starting to look good. Let's start baking that into our foundation. Let's start investing some money into it in our annual plans, and let's start expanding our workloads, maybe some small workloads at first. Then you get into the migration. Now, we are going to shut down this data center. We are going to not refresh that network storage or compute hardware for that next lease or technical refresh. And then after you go through that, you go to optimization. And now this is where you're building net new applications. You're starting to work backwards from your customers. You're starting to really innovate. Instead of just spending all your time maintaining your operations, you're actually freeing up your time to focus on innovative work and working backwards from, for your mission improvements and other things. And so, like I said, circa 2015, all of a sudden it shifted. We used to do large transformation engagements with customers. We would help them build strategies and roadmaps. And then all of a sudden they were saying, well, no, I only have a year and I have to be out. I had one customer that came to us 90 days before they had to go through an SEC-driven split into two companies. And so think about that. What would you do if you were told, you have 90 days now and you have to clone your entire business and all your infrastructure and move it into a cloud? Would you be ready for it? I don't think anybody would be ready for that, but still, working backwards from those business outcomes. So as they started to come to us and it was becoming very frequent, we need to do this very quickly. Can you help us? We had to shift our strategy in the way we deliver, in the way our partners deliver outcomes to our customers. And so we went through this three-phase journey approach. Very quickly, you sit down. How many people have heard of the Cloud Adoption Framework? It's been around since around 2014. It's on our public website. If you think of people, process, and technology, it's just a little more decomposed than that. So it's 6 perspectives. And based on those 6 perspectives, within 1 month or less, you can get an understanding of where you're at today and where the gaps are you have for becoming operationally ready. After that, 4 to 6 months, a readiness and planning engagement. This is where you do it yourself, you're working with a partner, you work with us, but we go through discovery and planning, landing zone, all these different areas and make sure you're operationally ready. It's not about migrating quickly and then figuring out how to document it and retrain your staff. That's not the approach. You need to get operationally ready very quickly, prove it out, and then start increasing your velocity of migrations. Any other way, you're not going to be happy. Your customers aren't going to be happy. You're going to be prone to security issues, compliance issues, availability issues, and cost overruns. So we don't want you to do that. We want you to do it the right way, but do it in an agile way so you can iterate and very quickly achieve those outcomes. And then once you get past that 4 to 6 months, you're into whatever you need. Some customers are doing massive new application and new capabilities, and some are just moving all their workloads over so they can drop their bottom lines. It doesn't matter what that is, but again, get operationally ready first, get the experience you need. And when we talk to CIOs and other executives, we say, when they say, help us build a 3-year plan, we come back and say, we could, but we don't want to help you build a 3-year plan. We want to give you a plan and a certain amount of money, so in the next 4 to 6 months, you can build your own strategy and plan based on validated learning, because you're going to take these workloads, you're going to move them, you're going to get learning, and based on that, you'll know what your organization can do. So again, the readiness assessment that I talked about, we have our cloud adoption framework. It's broken into 6 perspectives. So we have the business and people and governance. And then we have the platform, security and operations. And we have detailed questions for those, and we have detailed conversations during a workshop with a customer. Once we get that, we start to understand, and you start to understand more about where your gaps are based on some standard framework. It's not a grade, it's just an understanding of readiness. So we're not trying to say, oh, you're not good enough to do this. It's no, you're here, and that means you have to do maybe 2 more things to get to where you're going versus somebody else that might only have, less than that. 66 questions, 6 perspectives, 1 month. you're done. We don't belabor all this investigation and all these other things. Very quickly understand where you're at. So we can then go through the second phase. 8 work streams, 5 applications migrated in 16 weeks, 16 one-week sprints. How many people do Agile and do sprints within your organization? Do you do it for operations? How about for operations? Okay? You do it for software, a lot of people do. How about for security and compliance? How many people run Agile teams for achieving and maintaining security and compliance? Okay, we're going to show you tooling and everything. We have a number of people in the audience that have done this with us and actually developed methods for doing this for customers, and we're going to be going over some of those in the demo. Planning. First, you need to understand, like I said, don't give me money for the next don't ask for a plan for the next 3 years. Just give me enough funding so we can go in 4 to 6 months. You can go through your planning, go through your security risk and compliance, making sure you're baseline it. How many are federal agencies and DoD in the room? Is there a large portion? Okay, good portion. So you need an authority to operate. You need authority to test, authority to operate. You need to streamline that. You need to run it like any other Agile set of activities. You run some epics and stories and you drive them to closure. You don't mess around. You can very quickly do those things. Discovery and analysis. How do you know what you have today? And are your CMDBs up to date? Or are they up to date as of the last time somebody updated the spreadsheet or inserted something into some relational database, right? We need to do that front because you need to know what you have in order to figure out what you need to move if you are moving it. Landing zone. This is your virtual infrastructure. This is everything that you had in your data centers today and your WAN connectivity. Now this is everything that you have in AWS. It's all your accounts. It's your VPCs. It's your WAN connectivity and direct connect back into your on-prem. It's your hybrid networking. Because as you're moving things, it's not a big bang. You don't just take every application and move them one day at a time. You're starting to move pieces. You can actually move layers of applications depending on how close your co-locations or data centers are to your cloud regions that you're connecting to. So it's very important. But when you're doing landing zone, security is directly tied to it, as well as operations. How many people have SOPs and runbooks that are completely up to date, and you could give a brand new person that you onboarded a set of SOPs and they could work through and do their job starting, week 2? Hardly anybody does, right? We attack that in 2 ways. One, we do a lot of automation, and what is left after the automation is written runbooks. So if customers don't have runbooks today or SOPs, we teach them how to write runbooks and SOPs that are maintainable. Not novels, very short, very precise, very executable sets of documentation. So it's not all about documentation, but it's about documenting enough and supplementing that with a lot of automation. People skills org. One of the biggest factors, as I said earlier, during this readiness and planning and any customer transformation is on the people side. You have entire staffs and you have teams and you're organized, most likely functionally siloed, right? More structured. I have my network team and my cyber team and my Windows team and my Linux team. How many teams and how many orgs? The first thing they're thinking of, even if you're having conversations with them, you might be talking about WAN design and they're thinking, am I going to lose my job? You're talking about how they can improve operations so they can do more things, and they're thinking about, am I going to lose my job? We have to get past that, and the way to do that is by using readiness and planning to invest in your staff, to let them know that you aren't just replacing them. You're creating a safe environment for them to learn for 4 to 6 months and give them the guidance and mentoring they need to be successful, to transform what they do today into the skills and competencies they need to be successful in what you're asking them to do in the future. Those are very key things. And if they understand that you're investing in them, they start to opening up their eyes and their ears to what you're actually talking about versus being concerned about, am I going to have a job? Is my role shifting to the point where it's going to impact my career? Migration process and experience. you get no validation if you don't actually put something in production and cut it over. So you can do all this work and then somebody's like, oh, that was a POC, I'm not worried about that. But if you achieve an ATO and you actually move 5 applications and they're in production and you're accountable for maintaining them in production now and any security breaches or any availability issues, you have some skin in the game now. That's what we want. That's how we validate this entire 4 to 6 months, is because we actually get you to very quickly start moving applications into production. Now, if you have those running in production, back to the business case, this is where the CIO asks you for a 3-year plan. Now you have 5 apps in production. Maybe you had some Windows apps, maybe some J2E applications, maybe an ERP. Once you start to move those patterns that are representations of your larger portfolio, you can say with confidence, I know how long it took me to move this one, J2E application, so I could pretty much guess what it's going to take for the rest of the portfolio. It's now your plan that you're providing guidance based on your experience. That's what we're trying to do. 4 to 6 months, definitely worth the investment. Don't come in with long-range, 3-year plans first. Start off. That's going to get you much quicker. It's going to get your leadership much quicker to meeting their missions. As I said earlier, this isn't specific to AWS. Everything that we're going to go over, that Christine's going to talk about, and the demos that we're providing are really based on a set of books and thought leaders. How many people have read The Lean Startup? Eric Ries, okay? And then The Startup Way after that. So how do you do lean product development? You can apply lean product development just as easily to applications and enterprises and missions as you can to startups. Then, based on that, you have Lean Enterprise by Jez Humble from ThoughtWorks originally, then he went to Puppet Labs. He's talking about how do you do this for finance? How do you do this for all those other areas in an enterprise? But it's based on the thinking and learning from the Lean Startup. How many people read the Phoenix Project? Come on, Gene Kim. Right, okay. Socratic Novel. Gene Kim wrote the book after studying for 10 years and researching which book? The Goal by Eli Goldratt. Very good. And then It's Not Luck after that. So you're applying all these lean techniques that are based on really smart people doing really good things that in many cases, there's case studies in every one of these books that are tied back to like Amazon, some of our mechanisms and other things, as well as Intuit and a bunch of other customers and companies that are applying lean thinking at scale. And then the DevOps Handbook was that prescriptive guidance that came after the Goal. Which then Jez Humble and others contributed to. So this is what we've built mechanisms on. This is what we've been running experiments at customers for the last 5+ years, and then packaging them up and harvesting everything that's good from them year over year. And now I'm going to let Christine talk about the case study. Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Rodney. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into our AWS Engagement Delivery Framework. The things that Rodney was just talking about with the agile principles, it's not a secret recipe, as we know. So we're using and putting these lean principles to work with our customers when we're working on an MRP or any of these large customer engagements. This all starts with working backwards. So working backwards is an Amazonian mechanism. What does that mean? It's just a process that really facilitates innovative thinking. And you can see here on the left-hand side of the slide that we start all this off with a long-range planning session. So we're sitting down with our customer from day one to find out, what are your goals? What do you want to get to? Are you that customer that has to leave the data center by a certain time, or are you doing something else, and what's your timeline? From there, we develop our sprints, our backlog. I know folks raise their hand. It looks like you guys are familiar with Agile, so I can talk about backlog, epic stories that resonates with you. But I didn't see a lot of people raise their hand when we asked, are you doing this for your security? Are you doing this for operations? So we're taking a backlog approach and an agile approach across all of the work streams that you just heard about. Then this is translated and really reflected in our agile processes week over week. You heard Rodney mention we run weekly sprints. So the bubbles you see in the center of the slide reflect all of those activities that we're doing to chip away at those outcomes and reach our goals, or reach the customer or the partner's goals. I want to point out demo and retrospective, because I think Well, and let me just pause too. So demo, folks familiar with demo and retrospective? Yeah, I'm seeing some head nods. Okay. So demo, we're presenting, and the customer and the customer's team, we're all reviewing. Here's what we did through the last sprint. And during retrospective, what could we be doing better? How could we iterate? I want to pull these two out in particular because these are the built-in transparency. This is where we're working with customers week over week, not just at the end of a project. So week over week, checking in. Are we getting towards those objectives and outcomes on the timeline that we planned? And then all of this is to make sure that those results delivered at the end of the day are on target, especially if we're in a long engagement and things are changing throughout the life of that engagement. So again, none of this is a secret recipe. These are lean techniques applied with our customers that you could do too. You could do it on your own. You could do it alongside a partner. You could do it with us. To bring this to life a little bit more, we wanted to talk about a case study that we worked with a customer on most recently. The customer was a large US federal agency. They were working towards a goal to exit their on-premise data center and move to the cloud. You can see here the factors that were driving them towards migration. Some of these are federally specific, but I know we probably have some other public sector customers in the audience, and you guys probably could shake your heads to some of these factors that are helping or maybe motivating you to migrate as well. So this customer in particular was moving to the cloud. They had 800 virtual servers hosting over 300 applications, and they need to leave the on-premise data center by July of 2020. So we worked with them on the MRP engagement that you just heard Rodney talk about. We started around this time last year and worked with them through the variety of work streams. We know, like we've been talking about, the thread of people and process being a challenge. So we hit the ground running with them, focusing on the people, skills, and org work stream first. We worked with them to develop a cloud center of excellence with their office of the CIO, first and foremost, trying to get ahead of some of those people and process challenges that Rodney talked about. We then worked with them on a portfolio assessment and a review and analysis of their as-is environment to assess their readiness for migration to the cloud. We also worked with them to develop a landing zone, so that home base where things were going to move into. And we migrated 5 applications to that landing zone with them. And all along the way, like Rodney was talking about, they're learning. Their staff is alongside of us learning how to operate in the cloud, how to migrate to the cloud. As with any project, we experienced our fair share of challenges. Just really quickly, those in the room, can we have a show of hands if anybody has experienced at least one or more of these internal or external challenges? Yeah, we can all be honest. It's a safe space here. So just to deep dive on 2 of these really quickly. Resistance to cultural change. So this customer is a large federal agency. So imagine your Scrum team, or Scrum of Scrums, all up is over 100 people across different business units, right? So they're all coming with their own concerns and challenges, and they're going to fight against change. People don't like change. It's human nature. So some of the ways that we worked with folks to overcome this challenge is through education. So the MRP, like you're hearing, is an education and a safe space to learn. Another way that I want to commend the customer is that they took ownership of this challenge on their own. And actually, some of their teams decided to hold their own lunch and learn brown bag sessions where they work together on training that's available. And one of the other ways that we helped this customer overcome this change is to develop training plans that align to the job functions of the folks in their organization. So tailored journeys that each person could take according to their job function to get them over the hump or the learning curve. So that's one of the challenges that we overcame. Another one of the challenges is about exposing on-premise weaknesses. So as you can imagine, you're taking a look at building a landing zone. As you're doing that, it exposes things in the current on-prem environment, whether it's SOPs or runbooks or maybe even inventory information that maybe is lacking or missing. These are uncomfortable things for folks to own up, okay, well maybe our on-premise weaknesses are being exposed here. So how do you get through this? This is where I would point back to Lean and the engagement delivery framework methods that we leveraged. Having daily stand-ups, retros, the ceremonies I was showing a few minutes ago, these are areas of communication where folks from across those business units are coming together to overcome these challenges and issues. Overall, the work with this federal agency was a success. They now have a landing zone that they're going to be using to do that mass migration by July 2020. So this time next year, we'll be on stage hopefully talking about, okay, they're done. In the meantime, we were successful with the MRP. We also, like I said, migrated the five applications into their landing zone, providing that validated learning and also showing that the operational model that we worked alongside their team to develop is working. It's a working operational model. Of course, also the code repository and code pipeline and also agile methodology in action were also successful outcomes from this MRP. My favorite part of the story, though, is retrospective all up with the customer. So we did a great job of reviewing with the customer, well, what worked out of this? And he shared keys to success that he thought were critical for any organization or company moving in this direction. And I wanted to share them here today because I think they apply not just to federal, but also across public sector, any other agency or organization, that's looking to make this move. The first is let cloud be cloud. So one of the other challenges that we experienced was folks in the organization, stakeholders, pushing back and just wanting to replicate on-premise in the cloud. And I think we can all agree that that wouldn't enable the customer or the organization to really truly gain the benefits of being in the cloud. So he said, let cloud be cloud, and he still bangs on that drum today, and I couldn't agree more. Next is leveraging the agile tools and methods. We'll talk more here in the demo in a minute, so you'll see some of this in action, but those tools and methodologies gave the organization a communication channel, a decision-making process, and also tracking system and accountability that they didn't have before for large projects like this. So again, it's not a secret sauce. This is something that you could all do. It's not just an Amazonian thing, it's a lean and agile thing. And then involving key stakeholders and empowering your team. Back to the people thread that we're pulling. Finance, HR, all these other pieces of your organization are critical to making this change. So involve them early and consult them in decisions and inform them regularly. That's critical to success. And then lastly is empowering the team. One of the things we did early on with this customer is decide, well, who are the leads going to be? You guys are a really big agency. Who's in charge? Who's making decisions? Who can resolve disputes for us? And by putting those folks in place early for those workstream owners, that helped us really maintain, gain momentum and maintain velocity to make sure that we're helping them meet their goals on time. So now, I want to jump into the demo that we talked about. I'm going to switch over here. Okay, perfect. Can you guys hear me from this one? Yeah, great. All right. So we've been talking a lot about agile tools and methodologies. We wanted to actually go through and show you today our customer portal where we're working with customers. This is the portal that we also use to work with the federal agency that we've been talking about here in today's case study. This portal is representative of over 400 hours of work that's already been accomplished. So we're hitting the ground with our customers. We're hitting the ground running with our customers. And I've pulled up some artifacts from the portal that I specifically wanted to share with you, and also just wanted to share a brief overview of the sort of depth and breadth that you're seeing in this portal. We're coming to the table with templates already created that we work with the customer to tailor. So you can look at it as an 80% solution that we're working alongside the customer to finish that rest of the 20%. Do you want to talk a little bit about any of these artifacts in particular?
Sure. So landing zone connections, direct connect and WAN design. Typically, that's a pretty sensitive topic when you're talking about taking your cloud service provider, regions and VPCs and connecting them to your different on-prem locations and across your WAN to all your customer endpoints. So what we like to do is use data, use the techniques that we're talking about. For example, this document is broken down into 6 use cases. Each use case we have individual conversations around, and we have those little governance bars there that you can see the state of it. So we don't have a conversation about WAN. We have a very specific conversation about how we're going to do WAN connectivity from a direct connect perspective. And then we talk about what does that mean from a cost? What does that mean from an availability? And when you look at two different solutions that maybe meet both all the controls, security controls, if one costs less, maybe it might be better. Maybe you should be considering it versus the other one. So we use data. We use collaboration tools like this. For example, this document, it was probably a 40-hour write the first time it was written. It was instantly started to be used across multiple customers. With the customer in this case study, I think it's on its 81st or 82nd revision. The document itself is being revised that many times. The diagrams in each document are independently versioned inside of the documented pages. You have full transparency to every author, every change, and you can diff. Great example of when you go to your next customer, or wouldn't you like to start from this point versus starting from scratch on a blank page and trying to figure out how you even want to have these conversations? That's some of the value. Everything's embedded, everything's included. We have full transparency and traceability into it for this one.
And next up, wanted to talk through Runbooks. So actually something I forgot to mention when I was talking about overcoming challenges goes back to what you were talking about earlier with teaching our customers and working alongside of them to develop Runbooks. So with the move to the cloud, they're not only developing documentation for themselves, but also learning how to test and develop Runbooks going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's a great example, implementing AWS Federation. How many people have implemented AWS Federation with your AWS accounts? Come on, a few people.
One?
Okay, so put it this way. It used to be pretty challenging. What if you could get a paper that, and a runbook like this that's been tested year over year across multiple customers. It's 23 pages long. You can hand it to a novice that's never seen it before, that has Active Directory and ADFS experience, and implement it in 45 minutes, time over time, with no defects. That's the goal. That's what you're shooting for. So when we go in and help customers, we don't give them all the runbooks. We teach them how to write runbooks. We say, you write the first runbook because you know how to do your job and you know how to do it in the cloud, whether it's backup or DR, whatever it is. And then they have to hand it to somebody else, and that person needs to walk through it, and they can't help them. They need to watch that person struggle, and we're recording it, and they're getting feedback instantly on how well they wrote the runbook. Most of the time it doesn't go well the first time. Then they go back and take it back and make the modifications. And they hand it to a new person because the new person can't have any knowledge. And that person goes through it. By the time you go through it a couple times like that, by the time you get the third person to test a runbook, it's usually pretty solid. And after that, you've already learned how to write runbooks and what your bar is for actually getting to a baseline level. So it's little mechanisms like that that we apply. For example, this one includes everything, 23 plus pages long. It has the code at the bottom of it for command line interface federation for both Python 2, Python 3, PowerShell. Everything's in here, so you should be able to take those people that you're onboarding and not make them pair up with individuals for the first 3 months that they're onboarded to learn from things in their head, institutional knowledge. You need to get that knowledge out of people's heads. You need to get it documented and manage it in ways and govern it so it's maintained and constantly kept up to date. So this is just a good example of that.
Mm-hmm. And then quickly, if you want to talk about operational capabilities.
Sure. So operational capabilities, how many people have a fully documented, fully defined operating model for all your ITIL, ITSM capabilities, problems, incident, change, right? Everybody does, right? Everybody raise their hand. Perfect. Nobody does. So we come in and say, well, how about this one? So as Christine scrolls through this, it's already a predefined set. It has a breakdown and organization around what everybody's familiar with, ITIL, ITSM. We then go into definitions. It goes into specific roles and capabilities. Think it like mini RACIs. If you keep scrolling down, it's then broken into big sections of really operations. Application lifecycle, landing zone management, so on and so forth. We say, well, you could start with this. It should get you about 80% there. And then when we're working with you or you do it on yourself, you can just tweak it to get to that last 20%. And by the way, this wasn't us in professional services creating it. This actually came from and is used right now by our our managed services team, AWS managed services team, to actually provide a service. And this is their contract that they have with customers using AMS. So it's usually pretty good, and it's been tested over a number of years with many customers. So just another example of, we don't want you to start from scratch. We don't want to start from zero. We want to give you something that's probably good enough to get you to an operational readiness state, not an end state, because if you try to get to an end state, you're going to be 6 years from now continuing the work with like $3 million on each one of these work streams. You got to get to an operational readiness state. That means just do enough to be operationally ready across all the areas.
Great. So how are we doing this? Just to take us back to the methodologies. At the outset, you heard me talk about long-range planning. Long-range planning with our customers is often starts with a conversation also about commitment and timeline and things like that. So you're seeing here on my screen about governance. If I scroll down, you can see some ground rules. So any good Scrum team is going to create themselves some ground rules and make some decisions at the start for how they're going to be successful, and then of course iterate on these at their retrospectives. So just wanted to share this. These are some of the things that we have found to be success factors for large engagements like these migration readiness and planning projects. You saw the content. It's wide, it's deep. How are we going to get through all of this? One of the ways we do is we box off days. So for example, we may work with the agency that I was talking about earlier. We'll box off 3 days a week where we're focused on this engagement 8 hours a day for those 3 days with the teams that we're deciding with the customer. So going back to those teams and what we talked about earlier with defining those stakeholders early and giving them, empowering them to make decisions. This is also one of the key things. So getting with the customer before the team even starts work to decide who's going to lead up a work stream, who's going to run landing zone, and what does that actually mean. So just to use one of the examples from what Rodney presented, he talked about these governance bars. So this is key, right? It's easy for Confluence or any kind of knowledge management site to become almost a dumping ground, I hate to say it, a dumping ground of information, and your team will come back in here and say, well, what's done? What can I actually use? So to avoid that, we make sure that we're following some pretty strict governance around documentation and decisions. The governance bar here, template, draft, and review, baseline, the workstream teams and leads are responsible for this. So if I were the landing zone workstream lead, I would work with my team to come up with a design and bring it to baseline. Bringing it to baseline means that it gets demoed at that weekly event, sharing across all of the work streams, hey, this is what we decided for our design, this is what we've implemented, and making sure that we've got concurrence from all of the folks on the other work streams as well as our leadership. So that's a little bit about the governance. And of course, this is decided at the start of the engagement with whoever the big leaders are as well. So for the example that I'm talking about, the deputy CIO, was our ultimate decision maker. So everything that came through a workstream lead, they're empowered to make decisions at their level for designs and things like this. For critical decisions, we passed those to the deputy CIO and his leadership using this governance decision catalog. This is one of the key things that we have found to really help with velocity and transparency. So any decisions that the team is working on, they go ahead, they put in a ticket here. This is just a persistent Kanban board. So for folks that maybe aren't familiar with Jira, these are just a bunch of tickets, and if you click into them, you can get more information. And all of these tickets stay here. So if I pass the deputy CIO a ticket for that landing zone design and I put it in his under review column, then on a regular basis he knows what's our team working on and what progress are we making against our goals. And if he chooses to move that into the approved column, the whole team knows, oh great, he signed off on that, here we go, we're keeping on moving forward. And if in a few months' time we need to revisit a decision, or if we're feeling blocked by some of those stakeholders that may be digging their heels in, we can come back to the decision board. And if they say, well, I'm not going to do it because the decision wasn't made, actually, I think the decision was made. Here's when it was made. Here's why it was made. So this is really a critical piece to success.
Yeah, and so one of the other things, we talked about mechanisms earlier. So one of the things, if you're running a 16-week, 1-week sprint engagement, any one meeting that you miss because somebody's like, oh no, we can't do that. We've already agreed not to do that. If you have every decision in this IT governance decision catalog, you can stop those people and say, no, actually, as Christine said, at the deputy executive level, they've already signed off on these things, and now we're moving forward. So the people that try to bring up things and try to create roadblocks and blockers, you ultimately address it, because now you have full transparency of your IT policy. It's literally at the IT policy level now. You're treating it with that level of rigor. So great mechanism for keeping things moving forward quickly.
Yeah. Along that same vein of keeping things moving forward, just wanted to share a sample sprint schedule. What does this actually look like in action? So one of the things you hear us talk about is education. So typically the way we design our sprints is we're making sure we're having, whether it's lunch and learns or workshops, to educate folks before they have to go and work on these artifacts and make decisions at that team level. That way folks are all working from the same essential, baseline of understanding. And then, of course, you'll see on here our regular ceremonies. Another key piece that I want to point out is all the things you're seeing here are actually recorded. And so I think this could scare some people, or maybe they have to get used to it at first. We found it to be really helpful for a number of reasons. So we'll end up recording sessions with our customers and putting it in a recording library in their space. This is helpful for a number of reasons. One, internal marketing. If you are a company with these stakeholders that are digging their heels in, or even if you're not, you could turn a weekly demo, for example, of one of the team members demoing something into a little video. People love videos, right? We all like to go to YouTube and watch stuff. So you pass around a video internally with your organization of a demo, and you say, look at this awesome progress we made, or look how cool this is. And that's really helpful. Additionally, recordings are also helpful for velocity. If you are an organization with an impending deadline and you need to move fast, recordings are going to help, because you don't have to have all the stakeholders. We're all human, right? I want to take vacation. I want to go see my kids. So if I need to miss a meeting, I can, and it's recorded and I can catch up later. Of course, this isn't a ticket to just skip things, but it's helpful for maintaining velocity. So recording library, and like I said, the examples that I'm talking about today are mostly from this large federal agency that we worked with, and I know they were open to recording, and we worked with their legal team on it, so there are certainly things to be done around that if there are concerns with your organization.
And it's amazing how people change the way they act when they know they're being recorded during a session. I don't know why, I don't know what it is that drives it, but yeah, they're very nice and everybody's cordial, and maybe a couple profanities here and there, but that's what we use for a highlight reel, for certain.
And then two other things to create transparency and help with tracking. So for organizations that are looking to do a migration, whether it's big or small, a large number of things or small number of things, we tend to create boards from our projects in Jira. Again, for those not familiar with Jira, Jira is a ticketing management system that you can use to make sure that you're managing these weekly sprints and workloads so folks aren't getting overloaded, but you're still getting everything done. This is just another one of those persistent boards where you can see applications moving from left to right throughout migrations. It's a great way for tracking, and our executives love it because it gives them visibility into, am I going to make my goal? Am I going to be out of my data center by July 2020? And in addition to this, just one other board to share would be the Agile Compliance Board. So I don't know if we talked about it yet today, but in working with this federal agency, we actually turned their team into an agile team of ISOs working towards getting their ATO finished. And I think it was 35 days.
I think so.
I believe.
I'm seeing nods from somebody that is
Yes,
confirming.
I'm seeing a head nod from the person that did that. So, agile methods and lean techniques can be applied across your work streams, across your organization for visibility and transparency and also velocity. So like we said, 35 days, but also the key behind this is each of these controls that you see here are tickets, and if you dial into them, there's detail and there's conversation back and forth between the ISO saying, hey, how do I do this? Can you give me the screenshot? What is the evidence behind this? And all of that is tracked there till the end of time. So if you needed to go back and revisit any of this, you can.
Yeah, definitely year over year, renewal of all your compliance controls. Everything's documented, so you have a whole history, not just of this one that you did in that Word document. You literally have the full lineage of the control and the status of it. So very, very important. Excellent.
Great. That takes us through the things we wanted to demo, and we do have some time for questions and answers.
Yes,
Do you wanna
definitely.
jump into that?
So hopefully this was in line with your expectations. What kind of questions do people have? Yes, we do have a mic. Let's get 1 second. And that way we can.
So the process for this looks incredible. Is there a stripped down version that is publicly available that we could use to present to our leadership that would help sell this?
We don't have it right now externally, like open source. Some of the goals here are try to get as many of these things pushed out into open source. You can get one's the videos. The videos already have it. You have the slide share, slides from the videos as well. Those are all publicly, published after the fact. So you have that. But if you do need something more than that, you can just stop and talk. But today we don't have it to where here's a link. You can go download it from a public, other than these types of presentations and demos. Yeah.
What does a typical engagement team look like, number of people and skill sets?
Cool, excellent. So when you look at for the readiness and planning engagement? Yes. Yeah, so as Christine said, there was probably the extended team. On the customer side, there was like about 100 people. From the AWS Professional Services side, we had somewhere between like 3 to 6 total. There's like 3 core and then additional that came in for different stages, for different sprints. So it wasn't really big. And the skills were around landing zone. You had people skilled with network architecture as well as security and compliance. So all the standard skills that you would have. And that's why we had different work streams broken out in a different lead and then different consulting leads per work stream. Yeah. Other questions?
In the back,
All right.
and then in the front.
So just so I understand, excuse me, you did a lot of this work, and the work products is a part of a deliverable for a federal customer?
We start with this. We have kits. We call them delivery kits. So we go in with a portal that's used in Confluence today. It's just a portal or a site or a space in Confluence, and then we import the kits for like people and security and operations. And then as we're working with the customer, this is in the customer owned, not this here, but we're importing this into the customer's own Confluence and Jira instances, which they maintain even after we leave. So we use this to jumpstart it. It's like 400 plus pages and 500 plus backlog items, and it equates to like 100 templates.
So just so I understand, again, these are deliverables to the government?
Not in the sense of a legal deliverable. This is the mechanism we use to help them deliver and instantiate their operational capability. So it's not like from a contractual, I believe you're using that term.
I'm using the contractual component of it, and it gets back to the question the gentleman asked earlier, which is if the government's paid for it, then is there a way to reach out to the government agencies that have had some of these things delivered so that we could point our customers to those folks and say, here are people that have done some of these things?
Many of our customers are definitely open to having conversations with others, especially in the federal space. So if you want to get connected with one of the customers, we can't like name them out, but we can get you connected definitely if that's where you're going. Yeah. Any other questions?
As part of the MRP, do you guys actually look at the current workload and try to assess which can move to the cloud, or is it more of the user responsibility to figure that out?
Part of the portfolio discovery and analysis work stream is focused on first discovering what you have from an infrastructure perspective, then from an application perspective, so your app portfolio, and then what we like to do, if you're shutting down the data center, everything's moving. So then it's what's the most knowledge I'm going to get from migrating 5 apps? So if I look at my portfolio and I look at the distribution of technologies, what are the 5 most valuable experiments I can run meaning migrating them, so that will give me the most insights into moving the rest of my portfolio. So that's what everything's an experiment. You have hypotheses, and you're executing this 4 to 6 month set of experiments to get as much validated learning as you can to improve your strategy and roadmap. Does that make sense? Thanks.
Here,
All
one
right.
question.
One more?
I'm really curious about the 35-day security control evaluation. Was that to get an ATO?
Yes.
Or was that to, and what type of effort was involved to get all the artifacts you required for that?
It was I think it was like 4 to 6 ISOs running, being run in a daily stand-up, weekly sprints to get to that with the NIST 853 controls as their items that they had to take from, backlog all the way through complete. So from an SSP perspective. So that was the work within that time frame. And we just use these tools to really, instead of using Word docs and spreadsheets and everything else, we force them into the most optimal way to do their work so they could just focus on documenting the control and taking pictures of it or whatever they had to do. So, yeah.
Okay, so how does this work with vendor in the middle of AWS? So we can't directly go to AWS, and we're constantly going through a vendor. So how does that work?
Everything we've shown you, you can have partners help deliver this, or you can use a partner to help deliver it, or you could use us, or you could do it yourself. Like I said, there's not anything special here. It's just really the mechanisms that we put together based on lessons learned over the years to try to optimize this outcome. But no, so yeah, partners, we have tons of partners that deliver MRPs as well. So it's not just AWS. Thank you for asking that, because I do want to clarify. It's not, you got to come to us to get it done. We enter with an exit strategy from an AWS ProServe if we're small, and we want to work ourselves out of a job. Hence, we're trying to do as much as we can, so each next customer we have to do less. We good to go?
Yeah, well, let's thank Rodney and Christine for their time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.